This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
Robert Moore stood at the window of his mill, his brow furrowed with worry. The Napoleonic Wars had cast a long shadow over the economy, plunging his business into financial turmoil. The rhythmic clatter of machinery filled the air, a relentless symphony that once brought comfort, but now served as a constant reminder of his precarious situation. Each metallic clang felt like a hammer blow to his already frayed nerves. Outside, the Yorkshire landscape stretched out before him, a patchwork of green fields and rolling hills. But even this serene vista was marred by the thick, acrid smoke billowing from nearby factories, a stark reminder of the Industrial Revolution that was both his salvation and his curse. Robert's fingers drummed restlessly against the windowsill, the cool glass a sharp contrast to his feverish skin. His mind raced with calculations and strategies, each one a desperate attempt to keep his business afloat in these turbulent times. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden, threatening to crush his spirit. But Robert Moore was not a man easily defeated, his jaw set with determination, a fire burning in his eyes that spoke of an unbreakable will. He had faced adversity before, and he would face it again. The challenges that lay ahead were formidable, but so was his resolve. Turning from the window, Robert strode across the factory floor, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air was thick with the smell of oil and sweat, the heat from the machines creating a stifling atmosphere. Workers glanced up as he passed, their faces a mix of respect and apprehension. They knew as well as he did that times were hard, and change was coming. The new machinery loomed before him, gleaming and efficient. It was the key to his survival, the lifeline that could pull his business back from the brink. Yet it was also the source of tension that crackled through the air like electricity. The workers feared these machines, saw them as harbingers of unemployment and hardship. Robert ran his hand along the cool metal surface of a loom, feeling the potential thrumming beneath his fingertips. The contrast between the cold, unyielding metal and the warmth of his skin was a stark reminder of the divide between progress and tradition. He understood their fear, but he also saw the bigger picture. Adapt or perish. That was the harsh reality of their world. As he made his way back to his office, snippets of conversation reached his ears. Whispers of discontent, murmurs of rebellion. The opposition was growing, a tide of resentment threatening to sweep away everything he had worked for. Each hushed word felt like a knife in his back, but Robert steeled himself against the pain. Closing the office door behind him, Robert sank into his chair, the leather creaking beneath him like a groan of protest. He pulled out his ledger, the numbers staring back at him like a challenge. With a deep breath, he picked up his pen and began to work, his mind already formulating plans and contingencies. The scratching of his pen on paper was the only sound in the room, a rhythmic counterpoint to the chaos in his mind. As the day wore on and the shadows lengthened, he remained at his desk, determined to chart a course through the storm and emerge stronger on the other side. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, Robert's resilient and ambitious nature shone through. He was determined to succeed no matter the cost. The economic climate may have been harsh, but Robert Moore was harsher still in his resolve to keep his business afloat and prove his worth in this unforgiving world. As night fell, Robert finally set down his pen, his eyes burning from hours of poring over figures. He stood and stretched, his muscles protesting after so long in one position. Stepping out of his office, he was surprised to find the factory floor silent and empty, the machines standing like silent sentinels in the gloom. He made his way to the exit, his footsteps echoing in the eerie quiet. As he reached for the door handle, a sudden crash from the depths of the factory made him freeze. Heart pounding, Robert turned slowly, peering into the darkness. Was it just his imagination, or had he seen a shadow move among the machines? With a sense of foreboding, Robert stepped back into the factory, the darkness swallowing him whole. Little did he know that across town, Caroline sat at her desk, her own troubles brewing, unaware of the danger that lurked in the shadows of Robert's mill. The gentle rustle of leaves outside Caroline's window did little to soothe her troubled mind. She sat at her desk, quill in hand, attempting to distract herself with her studies. But her thoughts, like stubborn vines, kept creeping back to Robert. His strong jawline, his kind eyes, the way his lips curved into a smile. These images were etched into her memory, bringing both joy and pain. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken words and unfulfilled desires. Caroline's heart raced whenever Robert was near, her cheeks flushing with a rosy hue that betrayed her emotions. Yet his gaze would pass over her, as if she were merely part of the furniture. This indifference cut deeper than any knife, leaving invisible wounds that ached with each passing day. Outside, the seasons changed, painting the landscape in vibrant hues of gold and crimson. But inside Caroline's heart, a storm was gathering. She found herself caught between the expectations of society and the desires of her heart. The proper young lady she was raised to be warred with the passionate woman yearning to be loved. Loneliness became Caroline's constant companion, wrapping around her like a cold, damp fog. She wandered the halls of her guardian's home, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridors. The laughter and chatter of others seemed to come from a distant world, one she could observe but never truly join. Her fingers trailed along the cool walls, seeking a connection, any connection, to anchor her to reality. At night, when the house fell silent, Caroline's unfulfilled desires whispered to her in the darkness. Dreams of Robert's arms around her, his lips on hers, would leave her breathless and aching upon waking. The stark reality of daylight only served to deepen her melancholy, each sunrise a cruel reminder of another day without his love. As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, the weight of her unrequited love began to take its toll. Caroline's once bright eyes dulled, their sparkle fading like stars at dawn. Her appetite waned, food turning to ash in her mouth. Her spirit seemed to wither like a flower deprived of sunlight, each day draining more color from her world. She became a shadow of her former self, moving through life with a heaviness that concerned those around her. The vibrant, laughing girl was replaced by a quiet, withdrawn woman. Her smiles, once frequent and genuine, became rare and forced, a mask she wore to appease worried glances. Yet even as her emotional well-being suffered, a small flame of hope continued to flicker in Caroline's heart. It was a fragile thing, wavering in the winds of doubt, but stubbornly refusing to be extinguished. Perhaps one day, she thought, Robert would see her, truly see her, and return the love that burned so fiercely within her. Until then, she would carry this burden, her love for Robert both a source of life and a slow poison to her soul. Each day was a battle, a struggle to find purpose beyond her unrequited feelings. Caroline threw herself into her studies with renewed vigor, seeking solace in the pages of books and the scratch of her quill. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across her room, Caroline's ears perked up at an unusual sound. The distant rumble of carriage wheels broke the evening's quiet. Curious, she moved to the window, her heart quickening with an inexplicable sense of anticipation. In the fading light, she could just make out an elegant carriage rolling up the winding path to Fieldhead, the ancestral estate nearby. Who could be arriving at this hour? And why did she feel as if this unexpected visitor might somehow change the course of her life? Caroline leaned forward, straining to see more, her breath fogging the glass as the carriage disappeared from view behind the trees. Shirley's carriage rolled up the winding path to Fieldhead, her ancestral estate. Curious eyes peered from behind lace curtains and over garden walls, sensing the change in the air as palpable as the shift from spring to summer. The clatter of hooves on cobblestones echoed through the village, a rhythmic announcement of something new. As the carriage came to a stop, a hush fell over the onlookers. The door swung open, and out stepped Shirley, her emerald green traveling cloak catching the breeze and billowing around her like a vibrant flag of independence. Shirley's boots touched the ground with a soft thud, and she stood tall, her chin lifted. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, swept over her surroundings, taking in every detail of her new domain. There was no timidity in her stance, no demure lowering of the gaze that society expected of women. Instead, she exuded a quiet confidence that seemed to ripple through the air, as if the very earth beneath her feet recognized its mistress. The village buzzed with excitement. In parlors and shops, over steaming cups of tea and behind fluttering fans, speculation ran wild. "Did you see her?" whispered Mrs. Gale to her neighbor. "Standing there bold as brass, like she owns the place." Her friend nodded, adding, "Well, she does own it, doesn't she? I wonder what changes she'll bring." Shirley wasted no time in making her presence felt. She moved through the community with purpose, her financial independence granting her a freedom that set her apart. Where others might hesitate, Shirley strode forward, her actions as bold as the crimson ribbon she often wore in her dark hair, a splash of defiance against societal norms. Among those most affected by Shirley's arrival was Carolyn Helston. Carolyn, with her gentle nature and limited prospects, found herself drawn to Shirley like a moth to a flame. As she watched Shirley from afar, Caroline felt a stirring in her chest, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. Their first meeting was like a clash of worlds. Caroline, in her modest dress, felt plain and unremarkable next to Shirley's vibrant presence. But as Shirley's warm smile broke through, Caroline felt a spark of connection. "You must be Caroline," Shirley said, her voice rich and full of life. "I've heard so much about you. I hope we'll be great friends." Caroline felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "I'd like that very much, Miss Keeldar." "Oh, please," Shirley laughed, the sound as free and uninhibited as a bird song. "Call me Shirley, I insist." Their friendship blossomed quickly, nurtured by long walks through the blooming heather and conversations that stretched late into the night. Shirley's laughter seemed to breathe new life into Caroline's world, painting it in vibrant hues where before there had only been shades of gray. Yet as their bond grew stronger, so too did the contrast between their situations become more apparent. Shirley, with her inheritance and independence, stood as a beacon of possibility. Caroline, trapped by societal expectations and financial constraints, felt the weight of her circumstances more keenly than ever. "Sometimes I feel like a bird in a cage," Caroline confessed one evening as they sat in Fieldhead's library. The room was bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, the scent of old books and polished wood hanging in the air. Shirley's eyes softened with understanding. "Then we must find a way to open that cage, my dear Caroline. The world is too beautiful for you to be trapped." The social circle of the neighborhood found itself irrevocably altered by Shirley's presence. At gatherings and events, she became the center of attention, not just for her wealth, but for the fresh perspective she brought. Men who had never considered a woman's opinion on matters of business or politics found themselves engaged in spirited debates with Shirley, both intrigued and unsettled by her sharp mind and ready wit. "But Miss Keeldar," sputtered Mr. York during one such debate, his face flushed with a mixture of admiration and frustration, "surely you can't mean to suggest that women have a place in politics?" Shirley's eyes sparkled with challenge. "And why not, Mr. York? Are we not affected by the laws of this land? Do we not have minds capable of reason and judgment?" As summer deepened, so too did the relationships and dynamics within the community. Shirley's influence touched everyone, from the mill workers whose welfare she championed to the local gentry who found themselves reassessing long-held beliefs. She was like a stone thrown into a still pond, her impact rippling outward in ever-widening circles. For Caroline, Shirley's friendship offered both solace and challenge. In quiet moments, as they sat together in Fieldhead's library or walked arm in arm through the woods, Caroline felt a stirring of something long dormant within her. Hope, perhaps, or the first flickerings of her own strength. "Shirley," Caroline said one day as they stood atop a hill overlooking the village, the wind whipping their hair, "do you ever feel afraid of the future?" Shirley turned to her friend, her eyes serious. "Of course I do, Caroline. But I've learned that fear can be a compass. It shows us what's important, what's worth fighting for." As the chapter of Shirley's arrival drew to a close, the neighborhood found itself irrevocably changed. New possibilities hung in the air, relationships shifted and realigned, and the future seemed suddenly full of potential. Shirley Keeldar had arrived, and with her came the promise of a world where women like her and Caroline might forge their own paths, defying expectations and daring to dream of more. But beneath the surface of this newfound hope, tensions were brewing. The whispers that had started as mere curiosity were taking on a darker tone. Some saw Shirley's influence as a threat to the established order. Others resented the changes she represented. As the sun set on another day in the village, there was a sense of unease in the air, a feeling that something was about to give. Shirley stood at her window, looking out over the darkening landscape. She could feel it too, the shifting of the winds. "Change is coming," she murmured to herself, her hand tightening on the windowsill. Whether they're ready for it or not, the community was a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. Tensions had been building for months, and now they were about to reach their breaking point. As night fell, the air grew thick with anticipation. The streets, usually quiet at this hour, buzzed with an eerie energy. Whispers carried on the wind, speaking of frustration, anger, and desperation. In the distance, the silhouette of Robert's mill loomed against the darkening sky, a beacon that drew the restless crowd like moths to a flame. The first sounds of approaching footsteps echoed through the empty streets. What began as a low rumble soon swelled into a thunderous roar as a mob of workers, their faces etched with determination and fury, marched towards the mill. Their collective voice rose in a cacophony of shouts and demands, each word laced with the bitterness of months of hardship. Robert Moore stood at the entrance of his mill, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. He clenched his fists, willing his face to remain impassive despite the fear that clawed at his insides. The mob drew closer, and Robert could make out individual faces. Men he knew, men he had employed, now twisted with rage and desperation. "We want fair wages!" The cry tore through the night air, followed by a chorus of agreement. "Our children are starving," another voice added, the pain in those words cutting deeper than any knife. Robert raised his hands, trying to calm the surging crowd. "Please," he called out, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Let's discuss this calmly. Violence won't solve anything." But his words were swallowed by the roar of the mob, lost in the sea of anger that threatened to drown them all. The first stone flew through the air, whistling past Robert's ear. Time seemed to slow as he watched it sail by, his mind struggling to process what was happening. Then, as if a dam had burst, chaos erupted. More stones followed, along with whatever else the workers could get their hands on. The sound of shattering glass filled the air as windows splintered under the onslaught. Robert's men rallied around him, forming a protective barrier. But the workers, driven by desperation and fueled by their collective rage, pressed forward. The two groups collided like storm fronts, the clash inevitable and violent. In the midst of the chaos, Robert found himself face to face with a familiar figure. Tom, a man he had been forced to lay off just weeks ago, stood before him. The friendly eyes Robert remembered were now filled with a mixture of pain and hatred that made his stomach churn. "You did this to us, Moore!" Tom shouted, his voice raw with emotion. Before Robert could react, Tom's fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward. The taste of blood filled Robert's mouth as he struggled to stay on his feet. Each breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to make sense of the scene unfolding around him. The mill, once a symbol of his dreams and hard work, was being torn apart before his very eyes. Machinery lay in ruins, papers scattered like fallen leaves in an autumn storm. Each broken piece represented not just a financial loss, but a dream crumbling before his eyes. The realization hit Robert like a physical blow. This was about more than just business decisions. This was about survival. Just as it seemed the mob would overwhelm them completely, the sound of approaching horses cut through the din. The local authorities had finally arrived, their presence causing the crowd to scatter like startled birds. As quickly as it had begun, the attack was over, leaving behind a wake of destruction and pain. Robert stood amidst the wreckage, his body aching and his spirit shaken. The taste of blood lingered in his mouth, a stark reminder of the violence that had just unfolded. As he surveyed the damage, a heavy realization settled over him like the smoke that still hung in the air. This wasn't just an attack on his property. It was a wake-up call, forcing him to confront the harsh realities of the world he had helped create. The line between progress and exploitation, he now saw, was thinner than he had ever imagined. As the last of the workers disappeared into the night, questions raced through Robert's mind. How had it come to this? What could he have done differently? And most importantly, where would they go from here? The attack on the mill had changed everything. Robert knew that nothing would ever be the same again. As he stood there, surrounded by the remnants of his shattered dreams, he felt a shift in the air. Something was changing, not just in the community, but in himself. As dawn broke, casting a pale light over the destruction, Robert caught sight of a figure in the distance. Shirley stood at the edge of the property, her eyes wide as she took in the scene before her. For a moment, their gazes met, and Robert felt a strange flutter in his chest. But before he could call out to her, he noticed her attention shift. Her eyes moved past him, focusing on something or someone behind him. Turning, Robert saw his brother Louis approaching, and a new tension, different from the night's violence, but no less potent, filled the air. As Shirley settled into the rhythms of the community, her attention began to shift. Her gaze, once focused elsewhere, now drifted towards Robert's brother Louis. The man who had once been her tutor now piqued her interest in unexpected ways, stirring emotions she hadn't anticipated. The golden light of late afternoon spilled through the windows of Fieldhead, painting the polished floors with warm, elongated shadows. Shirley found herself drawn to the library more often than usual, her fingers dancing along the spines of well-worn books that Louis had once used to teach her. The familiar scent of leather and paper enveloped her, transporting her back to those bygone days. A wistful smile played on her lips as memories flooded her mind. Louis Moore stood in stark contrast to his gregarious brother Robert. His quiet intellect and reserved demeanor had always set him apart. As Shirley observed him from across the room, she noticed how his dark eyes would suddenly ignite when discussing literature or philosophy. It was like watching a still pond come to life, ripples spreading across its surface, hinting at hidden depths she longed to explore. Their shared history hung in the air between them, an unspoken thread connecting past and present. Shirley's mind wandered to moments from her youth, the patient way Louis had guided her through difficult Latin passages, his gentle encouragement when she grappled with complex mathematical concepts. These memories, once tucked away, now resurfaced with surprising clarity and warmth, wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. As days melted into weeks, Shirley's curiosity about Louis grew like a vine, reaching out tendrils of interest. She found herself seeking out his company, engaging him in conversations that stretched long into the evening. Their discussions ranged from the latest scientific discoveries to the intricate beauty of poetry, each exchange revealing new facets of Louis's character. It was as if she were seeing him anew, not as the stern tutor of her childhood, but as a man of depth and complexity who stirred something within her. The change in Shirley did not go unnoticed. Caroline, her dear friend, observed with a mixture of curiosity and concern the growing connection between Shirley and Louis. She saw how Shirley's eyes would follow Louis as he moved about a room, how her laughter seemed to ring out more freely in his presence. It was like watching a flower slowly unfurl its petals, reaching towards an unexpected source of light. Louis, for his part, maintained his usual reserved demeanor, but there were subtle shifts in his behavior that spoke volumes. His gaze would linger on Shirley a moment longer than necessary, his voice softening imperceptibly when addressing her. These small changes, almost imperceptible to others, were like whispers of possibility in the air. As autumn painted the countryside in rich hues of gold and crimson, the dynamics within their small circle continued to evolve. Shirley's growing interest in Louis added a new layer of complexity to the already intricate web of relationships. It was as if a pebble had been dropped into a still pond, sending ripples outward that touched everyone in their orbit. The history that Shirley and Louis shared became a bridge between past and present, coloring their interactions with shades of nostalgia and possibility. Each conversation, each shared glance, seemed to carry the weight of unspoken questions and unexplored potential. It was a delicate dance, full of hesitation and anticipation, like the first tentative steps on newly fallen snow. As the days grew shorter and the nights longer, Louis's character emerged more fully into the light. His intellect, once glimpsed only in the context of Shirley's education, now shone brightly in its own right. The depth of his knowledge, The keenness of his observations and the quiet strength of his convictions all combined to paint a portrait of a man far more complex than many had realized. In the soft glow of the evening fire, as Shirley and Lewis sat engrossed in yet another spirited debate, the true nature of their evolving relationship hung in the balance. The future lay before them, full of possibility and fraught with complication, a testament to the ever-changing landscape of the human heart. As the night drew to a close, Shirley found herself lost in thought, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't help but wonder about the path her heart was leading her down. Yet as she bid Louis good night, her eyes caught sight of Caroline. Her friend's face was etched with an expression of such profound sadness that it stopped Shirley in her tracks. What hidden pain was Caroline carrying, and how would it affect the delicate balance they had all been maintaining? Caroline's heart ached with a love that found no return. The pain of her unrequited feelings for Robert gnawed at her very soul, threatening to consume her entirely. As days melted into weeks, a suffocating isolation enveloped her, casting long shadows over her once vibrant spirit. The village of Briarfield bustled with life beyond the rectory walls, its cobblestone streets echoing with the chatter and laughter of oblivious inhabitants. Inside, Caroline withered like a flower deprived of sunlight, her uncle Mr. Helstone too engrossed in his books and parish duties to notice the gradual dimming of his niece's light. Each morning, Caroline dragged herself from her bed, her limbs as heavy as lead. The mirror in her room became an unwelcome companion, reflecting a stranger with hollow cheeks and dull eyes. Her hair, once the color of spun gold, now hung limp and lifeless around her face, a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil. "Perhaps today," she'd whisper, her voice barely audible in the stillness of her room. But hope, that fragile thing, seemed to crumble with each passing hour. The village streets that once welcomed her cheerful steps now stretched before her like an insurmountable obstacle course, each cobblestone a mountain to overcome. Mrs. Pryor, with her gentle demeanor and sharp eyes, began to visit more frequently. Her concerned gaze followed Caroline's every move, noting the girl's faltering steps and the tremor in her hands. "My dear," she'd say, her voice as soft as a summer breeze, "you seem unwell. Is there anything troubling you?" Caroline, ever the stoic, would force her lips into a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I'm quite all right, Mrs. Pryor," she'd reply, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Just a touch fatigued, that's all." As autumn's golden hues gave way to winter's stark palette, Caroline's condition worsened. Food lost its appeal, turning to ash in her mouth. Sleep, once a welcome respite, became a torturous affair. Her nights were plagued by fevered dreams of Robert's indifference, his face always just out of reach. The village doctor was summoned, his weathered face creasing with worry as he examined her. The cool metal of his stethoscope against her chest seemed to echo the hollowness within. "Rest and nourishment," he prescribed, his words falling on deaf ears. How could one rest when the heart was in constant turmoil? Robert, the unwitting architect of her decline, remained oblivious. His rare visits to the rectory were brief, his manner distracted. Each time he left, the sound of his footsteps fading away seemed to take a piece of Caroline with him, until she felt as insubstantial as morning mist. One particularly bleak afternoon, as rain lashed against the windows like nature's own tears, Caroline's strength finally gave out. She collapsed in the parlor, the thud of her fall echoing through the house like a gunshot. Mrs. Pryor, alerted by the sound, came running. "Caroline!" she cried, gathering the girl's frail form in her arms. "Oh, my poor child!" Words spread through Briarfield like wildfire. Whispers of the rector's niece being at death's door traveled from house to house, carried on the wind along with the scent of worry and curiosity. Neighbors arrived bearing broths and tonics, their faces pinched with concern as they peered through the rectory windows. In her fevered state, Caroline drifted between consciousness and dreams. Robert's face tantalized her, so close she could almost feel the warmth of his breath, only to have him fade away like mist at dawn. She reached out, her fingers grasping at empty air, a sob catching in her throat like a trapped bird. As days blurred into nights, Caroline's condition became the central concern of those around her. Mr. Helstone, finally shaken from his complacency, paced the halls, His footsteps echoed through the house, a constant reminder of the gravity of the situation. Mrs. Pryor rarely left Caroline's side, her cool hand a constant presence on the girl's burning forehead. "Fight, my dear," she'd murmur, her voice thick with emotion. "You must fight." And fight Caroline did, though each breath felt like a battle against an unseen enemy. Her body, once strong and vital, had become a prison, trapping her in a world of pain and longing. Yet deep within, a spark of life refused to be extinguished, flickering weakly but persistently. As night fell, bringing with it a hush over the village, Caroline's fever seemed to break. Her breathing eased, and a hint of color returned to her cheeks. Mrs. Pryor, exhausted but hopeful, allowed herself a small smile. Perhaps the worst had passed, but as the clock struck midnight, Caroline's eyes flew open, wide and unseeing. Her body went rigid, and a single word escaped her lips in a hoarse whisper: "Robert." The room was suddenly thick with tension. The air hung heavy, laden with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. The room was thick with tension. The air hung heavy, laden with unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Caroline lay motionless on the bed, her golden hair spread across the pillow like a halo, contrasting starkly with her pallid complexion. The crisp white sheets seemed to swallow her frail form, emphasizing her vulnerability. Mrs. Pryor stood at the bedside, her usually composed demeanor betraying a hint of nervousness. Her fingers fidgeted with the folds of her dress, a rare display of agitation from the typically stoic woman. The ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece seemed unnaturally loud in the hushed room, each second stretching into eternity. "My dear child," Mrs. Pryor began, her voice barely above a whisper. The words seemed to catch in her throat, and she swallowed hard before continuing. "There is something I must tell you." She paused, gathering courage like a shield around her heart. The weight of years of secrecy pressed down upon her, making each breath a struggle. I am your mother." The words hung in the air, weighty and transformative. They seemed to alter the very fabric of reality, changing everything, yet leaving the world unchanged. Caroline's eyes, dulled by illness, suddenly sparked with life. She struggled to sit up, her frail body shaking with the effort. The blankets rustled softly as she moved, the sound unnaturally loud in the charged silence. "My mother?" she repeated, her voice a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. The word felt foreign on her tongue, yet achingly familiar, like a long-forgotten lullaby. Mrs. Pryor nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She reached out, gently taking Caroline's hand in hers. The touch was electric, a connection long denied finally made whole. Caroline's skin was cool and dry, fragile like tissue paper. Yet Mrs. Pryor held it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Yes, my darling, I have carried this secret for so long, but I can bear it no longer, especially now seeing you so ill." Her voice broke, choked with emotion. The words she had rehearsed countless times in her mind now seemed inadequate, unable to convey the depth of her feelings. Caroline's mind reeled, trying to process this revelation. All her life, she had yearned for a mother's love, feeling its absence like a constant ache in her heart. And now here was Mrs. Pryor, no, her mother, standing before her, offering the very thing she had always craved. It was almost too much to comprehend, like trying to grasp water with her bare hands. "But why?" Caroline asked, her voice small and confused. The question hung between them, laden with years of longing and hurt. "Why did you keep this from me?" Mrs. Pryor sank into the chair beside the bed, still clutching Caroline's hand. Her face, usually a mask of calm efficiency, now showed every line of worry and regret etched by the years. She looked older suddenly, as if the weight of her secret had physically aged her. "It's a long and painful story, my dear," she began. Her voice was soft, barely audible over the gentle rustle of the curtains in the breeze from the open window. "One filled with mistakes and fears. I was young and foolish and scared. I thought I was doing what was best for you, but I see now how wrong I was." As Mrs. Pryor spoke, her words painting a picture of a troubled past, Caroline felt a surge of strength course through her body. It was as if the very revelation itself was a tonic, breathing new life into her weakened frame. Color began to return to her cheeks, a faint blush like the first light of dawn. The room, once a place of sickness and despair, now seemed to glow with a warm, healing light. The bond between mother and daughter, long dormant, began to blossom like a flower, finally given water after a long drought. The air itself seemed to change, becoming lighter, filled with possibility. As the truth unfolded piece by piece, Caroline's world shifted on its axis. She saw Mrs. Pryor, her mother, in a new light, understanding the depth of love and sacrifice that had driven her actions. And in that understanding, she found forgiveness. It washed over her like a gentle wave, soothing hurts she hadn't even known she carried. "Oh, Mother," Caroline whispered, the word feeling strange yet right on her tongue. She reached out, pulling Mrs. Pryor into an embrace that spoke volumes more than words ever could. The scent of lavender and clean linen enveloped her, familiar and comforting. In that moment, as mother and daughter clung to each other, years of longing and separation melted away. Caroline, who had always felt like a leaf adrift in a vast ocean, suddenly found her anchor. And Mrs. Pryor, who had carried the weight of her secret like a stone in her heart, finally felt the burden lift. As they held each other, both women wept. Tears of joy, of relief, of love, long suppressed but never extinguished. The revelation had not only provided Caroline with the maternal love she had always craved, but had also given Mrs. Pryor the chance to reclaim the role she had relinquished so long ago. In the quiet of the sick room, a new chapter began for both of them. The road ahead would not be easy, with years of separation to overcome and trust to rebuild. But as they sat together, hands intertwined, both Caroline and Mrs. Pryor knew that they would face whatever came next together, bound by the unbreakable ties of mother and daughter. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, a knock at the door interrupted their tender moment. A maid entered, her face etched with concern. "Miss Caroline, Mr. Moore is here to see you. He says it's urgent." Caroline and Mrs. Pryor exchanged a worried glance. Robert Moore's unexpected visit, especially at this hour, could only mean significant news. As Caroline steeled herself for whatever was to come, she couldn't help but wonder, what new challenge awaited her, just as she had found the mother she had longed for all her life. Robert Moore faced a pivotal moment in his life. He made the difficult decision to embark on a journey abroad, hoping to salvage his faltering business and secure a more stable future. The morning of his departure dawned gray and misty, mirroring the uncertainty that clouded Robert's heart. As he climbed into the waiting carriage, the weight of his decision pressed heavily upon him. The leather seat creaked beneath him, and the musty smell of old upholstery filled his nostrils, a stark reminder of the comfort he was leaving behind. As the carriage rattled away from the familiar streets of Yorkshire, Robert's eyes remained fixed on the receding landscape. The rolling hills and misty moors gradually faded from view, replaced by unfamiliar terrain that seemed to mirror the apprehension in his soul. Each turn of the wheel carried him further from everything he knew, every jolt a reminder of the risk he was taking. Back in the village, news of Robert's departure spread like wildfire, igniting a flurry of whispers and speculation. The once bustling mill stood silent, its idle machinery a stark reminder of his absence. The air hung heavy with the scent of unused oil and settling dust, a palpable representation of the void left in the community. Caroline, her heart laden with unspoken emotions, found herself drawn to the paths she once walked with Robert. The crunch of gravel beneath her feet echoed with memories of shared laughter and quiet conversations. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the ghosts of words left unsaid. Mrs. Pryor, ever observant, noticed the shadow that had fallen over Caroline's usually bright demeanor. One afternoon, as golden sunlight streamed through the parlor windows, she approached the young woman. "My dear," she said softly, placing a gentle hand on Caroline's shoulder. "Absence often serves to strengthen the bonds between hearts truly connected." The words, though meant to soothe, only served to underscore the ache of separation that Caroline felt deep in her chest. Meanwhile, Shirley Keeldar, the epitome of practicality, threw herself into managing her estate with renewed vigor. The clack of her boots on the wooden floors of Fieldhead echoed through the halls as she moved from task to task with determined energy. Yet even she couldn't deny the subtle shift in the community's dynamics. Robert's absence had left a void that seemed to affect everyone, like a missing piece in a complex puzzle. As days melted into weeks and weeks stretched into months, the initial shock of Robert's departure gave way to a period of reflection and change. Caroline, once shy and reserved, found herself stepping out of her comfort zone. The local church bazaar, an event she would have previously shied away from, became an opportunity for growth. Her trembling hands steadied as she arranged flowers, her soft voice growing stronger as she engaged with neighbors she had once avoided. Shirley, too, experienced a transformation. The responsibility she shouldered in Robert's absence forced her to confront her own capabilities and limitations. Late nights poring over ledgers by candlelight left her with a newfound appreciation for the intricacies of business management. She found herself growing more empathetic, her natural leadership tempered by a newfound understanding of the struggles faced by those around her. The village itself seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for something to happen. Gossip swirled like autumn leaves, with speculation about Robert's success or failure abroad becoming a favorite topic at tea parties and in the marketplace. The air buzzed with anticipation, each passing day bringing new theories and whispered conversations. Through it all, the bonds between those left behind were tested and strengthened. Caroline and Shirley, once friendly acquaintances, found their relationship deepening into a true friendship. They leaned on each other, sharing hopes, fears, and quiet moments of understanding that needed no words. Long walks in the crisp autumn air became a ritual, their footsteps in sync as they traversed the changing landscape of their lives. As the seasons changed, bringing with them new challenges and opportunities, the characters left in Robert's wake continued to evolve. Each day brought them closer to discovering who they truly were and what they were capable of achieving. The air grew cooler, leaves turned from green to gold, and the world seemed poised on the brink of transformation. And so, as the chapter of Robert's absence unfolded, it became clear that this period of separation was not just a test of relationships, but a catalyst for growth and change. The stage was set for future developments, with each character poised on the brink of transformation, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Fieldhead's grounds, Shirley found herself drawn to the drawing room window. The cool glass beneath her fingertips grounded her as her mind raced with thoughts of the future. Just as she was about to turn away, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A lone figure was making its way up the long drive, silhouetted against the fading light. Shirley's heart leapt into her throat. Could it be? After all this time? She squinted, trying to make out the features of the approaching visitor, her breath fogging the windowpane. The late autumn sun cast long shadows across Fieldhead's drawing room. Shirley Keeldar stood by the window, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the cool glass. The chill of the pane seeped into her skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of the proposal still echoing in her ears. Sir Philip Nunnally's words hung in the air, a mixture of flattery and expectation that left her feeling both honored and trapped. Shirley's gaze drifted over the rolling Yorkshire hills, their gentle slopes bathed in the golden light of the fading day. The landscape seemed to mirror her inner turmoil, beautiful, yet tinged with a melancholy that tugged at her heart. She inhaled deeply, the scent of autumn leaves and wood smoke filling her lungs, grounding her in the moment. Sir Philip was everything society deemed desirable in a husband. Wealthy, well-connected, with a gentle demeanor that spoke of kindness and stability. Yet as Shirley contemplated his offer, she felt a familiar restlessness stirring within her, like a bird beating its wings against a gilded cage. "My dear Miss Keeldar," Sir Philip's words replayed in her mind, his cultured voice as smooth as honey. "I offer you not just my hand, but a life of comfort and respect. Together we could be a formidable force in society." Shirley's lips curved into a wry smile, the expression reflected faintly in the windowpane. Formidable indeed, but at what cost to her own desires and ambitions? The thought of marriage, even to such an eligible bachelor, felt like shackles threatening to bind her very spirit. As she mulled over her response, Shirley's thoughts drifted unbidden to the absent Robert Moore. His face, stern yet kind, flashed before her eyes, bringing with it a warmth that Sir Philip's proposal had failed to ignite. Her heart quickened, a flush rising to her cheeks. She shook her head forcefully, sending her dark curls bouncing, pushing the image away. This wasn't about Robert. This was about her own path. With a deep breath that seemed to draw strength from the very stones of Fieldhead, Shirley turned from the window. Her decision crystallized like frost on a winter morning. Beautiful, delicate, yet unyielding. She would reject Sir Philip's offer, society's expectations be damned. The weight of her choice settled on her shoulders, heavy yet oddly freeing. Shirley moved to her writing desk, her steps purposeful on the polished wood floor. The scratch of her pen against paper filled the room as she penned her response to Sir Philip. Each word felt like a declaration of independence, a testament to her own worth beyond her status as a marriageable young woman. She was not a prize to be won or a means to social advancement. She was Shirley Keeldar, mistress of Fieldhead, and she would chart her own course. The letter complete, Shirley paused, her hand hovering over the candle flame. The warmth caressed her skin, reminding her of the passion she sought, not in a convenient marriage, but in a life lived true to herself. With a decisive motion, she pressed her signet ring into the pooling wax, sealing her fate with a firm touch. The wax cooled rapidly, a tangible representation of her resolve. As she rang for a servant, Shirley's mind raced ahead to the consequences of her decision. There would be talk, no doubt, disapproving whispers behind fans, raised eyebrows at social gatherings, perhaps even outright censure from those who deemed her foolish for refusing such an advantageous match. But as the servant departed with her letter, Shirley felt a surge of pride that outweighed any trepidation. In that moment, standing tall in the fading light of day, Shirley embodied the very spirit of independence she so cherished. She had faced the pressures of her status and emerged true to herself. As the last rays of sunlight painted the room in shades of amber and gold, Shirley allowed herself a small, secret smile. Whatever the future held, she would face it on her own terms, unbowed by societal expectations and unshackled by a marriage of mere convenience. As night fell, casting the room into deepening shadows, Shirley's thoughts turned unexpectedly to Louis. There had been something in his eyes lately, a warmth that stirred feelings she'd scarcely acknowledged. Her heart fluttered at the memory of their last conversation, his voice low and intense. Could it be that Louis? Shirley shook her head, dismissing the notion. And yet, as she prepared for bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring a revelation that would change everything. Louis's heart pounded in his chest, threatening to burst through his ribcage. He summoned every ounce of courage within him, his hands trembling and his voice quivering as he prepared to confess his love for Shirley. The garden around them seemed to hold its breath. The sweet scent of roses hung heavy in the air, mingling with the earthy aroma of freshly cut grass. Sunlight dappled through the leaves of ancient oak trees, casting shifting patterns on Shirley's face as Louis finally spoke the words he'd been holding back for so long. Shirley, I love you. The words hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Shirley's eyes widened, a kaleidoscope of emotions flickering across her face. Surprise, confusion, and something else Louis couldn't quite read. The world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, the gentle rustle of leaves and distant birdsong fading away. Louis watched, his heart in his throat, as Shirley's expression changed. Her brow furrowed, creating a small crease that Louis longed to smooth away with his thumb. She took a step back, her silk dress whispering against the grass like a sigh of disappointment. Louis, Shirley began, her voice soft but resolute. I cannot accept your love. The words hit Louis like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his hand grasping blindly for support. His fingers found the rough bark of a nearby tree, its solid presence anchoring him as his world spun off its axis. But why? He choked out, his voice barely more than a whisper. Shirley's eyes softened with sympathy, but her resolve remained unshaken. We come from different worlds, Louis. The gap between our social standings is too wide to bridge. As she spoke, the cruel reality of their situation crashed down upon them both. Louis, a tutor of modest means, and Shirley, a wealthy heiress. Their love was like a delicate wildflower trying to bloom in the cracks of a stone wall. The garden, once a sanctuary of beauty and peace, now felt like a mocking reminder of the divide between them. The manicured lawns and exotic flowers spoke of a life Louis could never provide, a world he could never truly belong to. Each perfectly pruned hedge and carefully arranged flower bed seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." Louis's mind raced, searching desperately for words to change her mind. He wanted to tell her that love could conquer all, that their feelings were stronger than any societal expectations. But the words died on his lips as he saw the determination in Shirley's eyes, as unyielding as the iron gates that surrounded her estate. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Louis felt the weight of his unrequited love settle on his shoulders. It was a burden he would carry, a secret flame that would continue to burn in his heart, warming him even as it scorched him from within. Shirley turned to leave, her silhouette framed by the fading light. Louis watched her go, his heart breaking with each step she took. The soft swish of her dress against the grass sounded like the closing of a book, the end of a story that had barely begun. In that moment, Louis realized that sometimes love wasn't enough to overcome the barriers society placed between people. The thought was as bitter as unripe fruit, leaving a sour taste in his mouth. As night fell, Louis remained in the garden, surrounded by the beauty he could admire but never possess, much like Shirley herself. The stars above twinkled indifferently, reminding him of the vast distance between his world and hers. Each pinprick of light seemed to mock him, so close and yet impossibly out of reach. In the quiet of the evening, Louis made a silent vow. He would prove himself worthy, not just of Shirley's love, but of a place in her world. The path ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges, but Louis was determined. For Shirley, he would move mountains, cross oceans, and reach for those distant stars. As he finally turned to leave the garden, Louis carried with him a mix of heartache and hope. The rejection stung like salt in an open wound, but it had also ignited a fire within him. He would face the world with renewed purpose, driven by his love for Shirley and his desire to bridge the gap between their worlds. The chapter of his confession had closed, but Louis knew that his story, their story, was far from over. With one last look at the stars, he stepped forward into the uncertain future, his heart full of unspoken promises and unwavering devotion. As Louis reached the edge of the garden, a sudden commotion near the main house caught his attention. Through the gathering darkness, he saw a carriage pull up, its wheels crunching on the gravel drive. A tall figure stepped out, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the open door. Even from a distance, there was something familiar about the man's bearing, something that made Louis's heart skip a beat. Could it be? After all this time? Robert Moore stepped off the carriage, his eyes scanning the familiar landscape of his hometown. His travels had transformed him, not just in appearance but in spirit, making him a more successful and socially aware man than when he had left. The crisp autumn air nipped at his cheeks, carrying with it the earthy scent of fallen leaves. Golden and crimson foliage adorned the trees lining the road, a vibrant tapestry that mirrored the changes within him. As Robert's boots crunched on the gravel path leading to his mill, each step felt weighted with newfound purpose. The factory loomed ahead, its brick walls no longer as imposing as he remembered. It was as if his broadened perspective had shrunk the once daunting structure to a more manageable size. The rhythmic clanking of machinery drifted through the air, a familiar symphony that now carried a different tune to his ears. Workers bustled about, their faces etched with weariness that Robert now saw with startling clarity. Where once he had viewed them as mere cogs in his industrial machine, he now saw individuals, fathers, mothers, sons and daughters, each with their own hopes and dreams. The realization hit him like a physical blow, leaving him momentarily breathless. He paused at the mill entrance, his hand hovering over the door handle. Memories of his former self, driven solely by ambition and profit, flashed through his mind. The old Robert would have marched in, barking orders and demanding results. But this new Robert, tempered by his experiences abroad, took a deep breath and steeled himself for a different approach. Inside, The familiar hum of machinery enveloped him. The air was thick with the scent of oil and cotton, a smell that once represented progress and profit. Now it whispered of the toil and sweat of those who operated the machines. Robert moved through the factory floor, nodding and smiling at his workers. Many did double takes, clearly surprised by his transformed demeanor. As the day wore on, Robert found himself truly engaging with his employees for the first time. He listened to their concerns, his brow furrowing as he took note of safety issues he'd previously overlooked. With each interaction, the seed of social consciousness that had been planted during his travels took root and grew stronger. But amidst all the changes and new resolutions, one constant remained: his feelings for Carolyn Hellstone. Her image had been a beacon during his darkest moments abroad, a reminder of the goodness and warmth he'd left behind. Now, with his newfound clarity and purpose, Robert knew what he had to do. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in a breathtaking array of pinks and oranges, Robert made his way to the Hellstone residence. His heart raced with each step, a mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through his veins. The gravel crunched beneath his feet, each sound seeming to echo his thundering pulse. Caroline answered his knock, her eyes widening in surprise and joy at the sight of him. "Robert," she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're back." In that moment, looking into her eyes, Robert saw his future unfold before him. All the doubts and fears that had held him back before melted away, leaving only certainty in their wake. With a gentle smile, he took her hand in his, marveling at its softness. "Carolyn," he began, his voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "My time away has shown me many things, but none more important than this. I love you. I've always loved you. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to hold its breath as he waited for her answer. Carolyn's eyes filled with tears, a smile blooming on her face like the first flower of spring. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Robert, I will marry you." As they embraced, the last rays of sunlight bathed them in a golden glow, a fitting backdrop to the beginning of their new life together. Robert held Caroline close, inhaling the sweet scent of her hair, marveling at how his journey had led him right back where he belonged, but as a better man, one worthy of the love he'd always longed for. Yet as the couple basked in their newfound happiness, neither noticed the figure watching from the shadows. Shirley Keeldar stood frozen, her heart constricting painfully in her chest. She had come to speak with Caroline, to confide in her friend about her own tumultuous feelings. Now, as she witnessed the tender scene before her, a storm of emotions raged within. Jealousy, regret, and a dawning realization threatened to overwhelm her. With trembling hands, Shirley turned and fled, her mind reeling with the sudden clarity of her own heart's desires. Shirley's heart, once fortified by pride, finally surrendered to the truth of her feelings. She recognized the profound connection with Louis, a bond that defied the constraints of social status. The morning light filtered through the study window, casting a warm glow on Shirley's face as she stood lost in thought. Her fingers absently traced the intricate patterns on the heavy curtains, the familiar texture grounding her in the moment. The air felt charged with possibility, as if the very atmosphere sensed the shift in her heart. Outside, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the old oak tree, its whispers seeming to echo Shirley's inner turmoil. She took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of old books and polished wood that permeated the room. It was here, surrounded by the trappings of her privileged life, that she finally allowed herself to embrace the truth she had long denied. Louis. His name floated through her mind, bringing with it a flood of emotions. Memories of his unwavering devotion, his patient understanding, and his quiet strength washed over her. Shirley's heart raced, the rapid beating a stark contrast to the stillness of the room. Her eyes fell upon his letter on the desk, the familiar handwriting calling to her like a beacon. With trembling hands, she picked it up, the paper rough against her fingertips. Each word seemed to pulse with the love Louis had poured into it, a love that had weathered every storm of doubt and hesitation she had thrown its way. Shirley moved to her writing desk, the chair creaking softly as she sat. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, its crisp whiteness a blank canvas for her newfound clarity. The pen felt heavy in her hand as she began to write, her words flowing like a river breaking free from a dam. She poured her heart onto the page, laying bare her fears, her hopes, and most importantly, her love. As the last word dried on the paper, Shirley felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She sealed the letter with a sense of finality, the wax stamp a physical manifestation of her commitment. A smile tugged at her lips, small at first, then growing until it lit up her entire face. Across the village, another love story was reaching its crescendo. Caroline and Robert, their bond forged in the fires of adversity, stood on the precipice of their own happily ever after. Caroline, once a timid flower, had blossomed into a woman of quiet strength. Her love for Robert had transformed her, giving her the courage to stand tall in the face of societal disapproval. The news of the impending double wedding spread through the village like wildfire. The air buzzed with excitement, the scent of blooming flowers mingling with the anticipation of new beginnings. Everywhere, people whispered and smiled, caught up in the romance of it all. As the big day dawned, the sky was a canvas of soft pinks and golds, as if nature itself was celebrating the unions about to take place. The church bells rang out, their joyous peals echoing across the countryside. Inside the church, flowers adorned every surface, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Shirley stood at the back of the church, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Her wedding gown, a masterpiece of silk and lace, rustled softly as she took a deep breath. As the music swelled, she began her walk down the aisle, her eyes locked on Louis. Time seemed to slow as Shirley moved towards her future. Each step brought her closer to the man who had waited so patiently, who had loved her so completely. When their hands finally joined, it felt like coming home. Beside them, Caroline and Robert stood hand in hand, their faces aglow with the quiet joy of a love long fought for and finally realized. The couples exchanged vows, their words resonating with the power of promises made not just to each other, but to the very idea of love itself. As the final I do was spoken and rings were exchanged, the church erupted in cheers and applause. Shirley and Louis, Caroline and Robert emerged into the sunlight as married couples, their faces radiant with joy. A shower of flower petals rained down upon them, filling the air with color and fragrance. The celebration that followed was a testament to the power of love, to unite not just individuals, but entire communities. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the festivities, laughter and music filled the air. Shirley looked around at the faces of her friends and family, all brought together by the love she and Louis shared. In that moment, surrounded by joy and bathed in the warm light of the setting sun, Shirley knew that this was more than just a happy ending. It was a new beginning, a fresh chapter in a story that would continue to unfold. She squeezed Louis's hand, feeling his answering pressure, and smiled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their love a beacon guiding them home. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Shirley and Louis, Caroline and Robert danced beneath them, their hearts full and their futures bright. The story of their love had reached its joyous conclusion, but in many ways it was just beginning.
This book was generated using Speakder's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.